Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Come on. Thank you, guys. Listen, it's amazing to be in Boston. I just want to say I've never been here. I've always wanted to come to this city. Such amazing music in this town. So we're going to have a little bit of fun here because we're going to pay homage to a lot of the local Boston music. It's an honor to be here talking to you guys about NativeScript specifically. It is a personal passion of mine. I fell in love with it back in the fall of last year. And it's just been amazing to work with for the past almost a year now. I want to talk to you guys about a personal passion project of mine, and it is Shout Out Play, the app to record personal dedications using your favorite music for events or just for fun. It is available right now on the App Store and Google Play. The Android version is in a very early, I would consider it an alpha release at this point, but I am happy with the iOS version at least, and I'll get into more details of that. But I want to share my experience building this app and some of the things that I ended up running into with NativeScript Angular, or Angular Native, as we may call it here soon. It was built entirely with NativeScript Angular, or Angular Native. The first commit was on April 9th of this year. It was ready and submitted to the App Store by July 6th. Okay, that is less than 3 months part-time. Okay, mind you, I am a full-time software engineer with InfoWrap, and this is a testament to how productive you can be with NativeScript. And definitely when you combine it with Angular, if you know Angular, it can be a very productive environment to work with. Since I was developing with NativeScript, I knew Android would be possible, but iOS was the focus, for sure. I come from an Objective-C background, so a lot of my experience coming into NativeScript was from a particular bias with Apple, and I really was curious how the performance would play out coming from a purely native background. So a lot of this was very eye-opening to me, coming from a true native background. And again, I get some help from some of the community, amazing community contributors who know Android a little bit better, who have helped kind of bring the Android side along, but we'll get into that here in just a little bit. I did end up getting into Android, I should say, around August 6th, so that is just a little over a month ago, and it, of course, came together pretty quick. In April, I should note that when that first commit went in, NativeScript Angular, which is the custom renderer for Angular by the NativeScript team, it was in the Angular 2.0 beta 14 stage. We weren't even in the RC stages yet, so this was a very moving pieces point in time. There was a lot that we ran into, and it definitely is not for the faint of heart. As we all know, working with beta software can be pretty tough. But I was up for the challenge. So I should mention right away that I absolutely love the web. I am a true web developer. But what is interesting about this application is it could not have been done on the web. Spotify Web API only allows 30-second previews of songs. So you could not play full tracks. That is extremely limiting. So I had to use native SDK for Spotify. Let me rewind just a little bit and go back to before that first commit on April 9th and talk a little bit about the dream. Ah, yes. Well, this goes out to all the dreamers out there like me. You guys are dreamers, right? Imagine, what if there was an app that would let me record personal dedications, shout-outs, if you will, and add them to some of my favorite music so I could dedicate a song to someone at a party or an event. I was looking around and I thought for sure this app must exist. It sounded like something that definitely would have been done maybe years ago, but surprisingly, I did not find this. If you guys know of something like it, talk to me afterwards and let me know. But to my surprise, I couldn't find anything quite like it. So my dream was born, and I sketched out this one and only UI concept, what I generally envisioned for the usability. I also really wanted to put the app through NativeScript Angular's paces because it was early at that time and I was evaluating the viability of using it with my day job. And so I really wanted to understand how this could be used for a production app. And so on part, it was a dream app I wanted to build, but on the other hand, it was actually an experiment to test and see how viable NativeScript, or Angular native, I should say, it could be in a production environment. So I also wanted to flex through a lot of the community plugins. There was tons that were coming out at this time, and a lot of friends of mine on the Slack channel were developing a lot of these plugins, and I really wanted to know, would these plugins work in production? What would we run into if we submit it to the App Store? Would they even get past some of the App Store's requirements? We really didn't know at that time. So again, before I even realized it, it was July 6th, less than 3 months, and I submitted it to the App Store, the first build. Okay, and can anyone guess what happened?
Can you believe this? He worked on this app so long and so hard, he didn't pay any attention to me, he ignored all my advances, and for what?
It was kind of like that. That's my wife. She was amazing support through this process, but I got to say, this was a huge letdown. Honestly, super depressing. I thought, honestly, at this moment, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to pull this off. Believe it or not, the reason it got rejected was because Spotify did not support IPv6. What? IPv6? As of June 1st, the App Store mandated all apps submitted must support IPv6. This was a huge surprise. It was totally not on my radar, but there was an issue created on the Spotify iOS SDK repo that they were working on it, so there were some slim hopes at this time that they may pull it off. But I really had no idea what was going to happen. So it was a sad moment. Okay, let's rewind a bit though and get back to the fun part. Okay, the development part, the really exciting, and maybe we'll come back to this.
You can code against Objective-C APIs, Java APIs. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Yeah, this was the moment, okay? In the spring, the thought of coding against native APIs, native audio, core graphics, real-time audio waveforms, Spotify native SDK, this is really what the development experience is about. A lot of excitement going into this. I come from a music background, and being able to work with native audio is something that you really want to be able to do, because on the web audio is awesome, but sometimes getting real-time buffer streams through and actually getting real-time audio waveform displays it can be tricky. So this was just incredibly exciting. So the first plugin on deck, the first toy, was NativeScript Spotify. This is where I was really able to kind of flex through what was possible with NativeScript for me. It was kind of a proving ground to determine how much could we do with it and what the limitations were. So this was daunting, though, because the iOS SDK had a lot of tricks to it. There were things that weren't completely done. It's now in beta 21, so it's more beta software. And didn't know exactly what I was signing up for, but again, focusing on iOS, I at least had the confidence of knowing Objective-C a little bit better. So, of course, the goal in the beginning was just to create an easy API to work with, something that would just be able to construct a streaming player that you could play and pause. So no bells and whistles, just a player that you could stream a Spotify track and pause it. And so this is a little snippet of what the current plugin now looks like. If you construct it, if you use this, you can construct TNS Spotify player, and you can use it straight up. Now, I also have this init player method where you can pass true if you want to get events. So you can actually wire in all the rich set of events that the SDK provides. Things like starting, stopping, playback, current duration, when volume was set, when microphone was set. All these things, if you want to develop a full-blown musical application, you could. And I use a few of these inside Shoutout Play. For instance, album art change and off login success are some of the things that I have wired in. This is a look at what the iOS player looks like on the plugin side. So if you notice here, this is using, or it's extending NSObject. This was a key thing that in the early days was interesting to me, because when I was first trying to wire up delegates, you can't wire any delegate event unless your class extends NSObject, because it's by extending NSObject that you actually then enter your class into the realm of Objective-C. And now you can implement these protocols. And that's where things get really, really rich. So you can see here where I statically define the two Objective-C protocols used for the player. SPT audio streaming delegate and the streaming playback delegate are two of the primary ones from the SDK. I would pull up that API and show you guys, but I'm not sure I can get through on the net here. But this API, you can see, really is very simple. At the heart of it is this toggle play method. That allows you to toggle playback and play new tracks. So it's, at its core, really one method to control the playback. This is a look at the Android player. This didn't come till much later, but I want to give a huge thanks to community contributor Brad Martin. He really made this a reality. This was another area that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to pull off. I knew I couldn't pull it off by myself. So leaning on the amazing community in NativeScript, we were able to make this a possibility. But you can see the API in the Android player is the same as it was in iOS. We have a toggle playback method, and that's really at the heart of it. There's some other things that are on this player, like setting volume and those types of things. But again, the core of this plugin was just to provide an easy API that you could use consistently across iOS and Android to control Spotify. Now, again, as I mentioned before, I wanted to use a ton of community plugins. So this app uses 16 community plugins. It was a lot, and I actually thought that this would create a giant app size, and I'm going to touch on that here a bit later. But out of these 16 plugins, I contributed or authored 11 of them, and 3 of them are Apple only. So that was another big question mark at the beginning of this. Could I use a iOS-only plugin that also needed to be used on Android, or what would I do when I cross over to Android to handle that functionality? That was a big question mark. And a good example of that, if my GIF will play here, this is it. This is a sample of the record screen inside the app. On the left, we have iOS, which is using the NativeScript Easy Audio plugin. And on the right, I'm actually just using stack layouts. So these are using 2 totally different plugins, but they work exactly the same as far as how it's wired up and how you use it. The Easy Audio plugin is an Objective-C library, which is now deprecated, but it is going to live on, according to the author. I may fork it and keep it living on, but it's a fantastic Objective-C library that allows these really high-performance, low-latency real audio streams and visualizations. So again, on the right, on Android, this is stack layouts, 5 stack layouts. I'll show you a little bit of what this looks like. On iOS here on the left, you can see this is the audio plot component that comes from the Easy Audio plugin. And I have one data binding on it, which is just setting the color. And then on the right, I'm actually wiring into the Easy Audio's recorder and then the Easy Audio player. So you get the live feedback when you're recording and when you're playing that track back. Inside of that event wiring, I'm setting the buffer data on that custom component. So I'm actually grabbing a reference to the component on the left, and then I'm just setting that property. And what you just saw there is the result of that real-time buffer stream hitting that visualization. On the device itself, it's even smoother than that, because that's actually just an animated GIF. So it's the performance is amazing. Here's a look at Android. So the difference here you can see on the left is literally 5 stack layouts positioned inside of a grid layout with some padding to separate them a bit. And on the right, I'm just showing that this is using 2 different classes. So you can see I'm constructing TNS player and TNS recorder. Again, if we look back here, I'm constructing TNS EZ Recorder and EZ Player. So these are two different plugins, two different constructions that are happening for each platform, wired in the same view. This is just a short snippet on the left. I actually have an iOS or Android hook around those in the actual view, but I'm just simplifying it here for you guys. And then further down in this look here, you can see how the actual events are getting observed on those stack layouts. So on the right, I actually just set up an interval. Every 100 milliseconds, I grab the meters from the recorder, and I'm using RxJS observables to actually bind the height value on those stack layouts, and it's just emitting those values, and then I'm randomizing some of the values just to make it look a little more organic. So just a testament that even when you run into situations with NativeScript where you're dealing with something that's just for one platform, it's not a limitation, it's almost an opportunity for creativity, because there's all sorts of things you could do to get around these scenarios. This is a look at how to conditionally require a plugin. So I use TypeScript. So for instance, if you require in a plugin that is only available on one platform and you run that platform, it's going to crash because you're requiring in a plugin that's not supported on that platform. This is how you can conditionally require those plugins per the platform. So I'm using the isIOS Boolean hook that's provided by the NativeScript modules and conditionally require the iOS plugin there, Easy Audio, and I just declare some variables to set those and use them throughout the class. And then below there, those are the Android plugins that are used. Okay, let me talk about the architecture just for a minute. The architecture is really what I love, and that's what makes me love Angular so much, is because you really get this rich set of possibilities with how you want to architect your app. So Angular Native, of course, is at the base, and then I have Firebase integrated. This is using Eddie's Firebase plugin, and that's used for playlist management. So in the app, you can create a playlist, you can edit tracks on that, and everything is backed up and stored on a Firebase database. Every single recording you make, every shout out, all of those are persisted. So if you uninstall the app from the device and then you install it on a different device, it actually pulls all your shout outs down again, and so you have those wherever you go all the time. Firebase allowed that to happen. And then on top of that, I'm a big fan of Redux. Alex is going to talk about that more in depth after me, but we get Redux via ngrx store, which is a fantastic library from Rob Wormald and Mike Ryan. But it really provides a nice foundation to work with. This is kind of a view of the ngrx integration in the app. Just of note, there's 29 unique actions and 6 reducers, which may sound foreign to those who are not familiar with Redux-style building, but essentially at the core concept, the gist is you can just dispatch actions, your components can be a little dumber, and then your services can pick up those actions and actually do work based on that. So it really allows you to decouple what your UI is doing and what the services do to respond and react to those actions. Most of the actions reside in the Firebase service, which have to do with data flow. A one-way data flow throughout the application, and that's dealing with creating shoutouts, updating playlists, that sort of thing. On the right, you can see the player is actually really simple. I was able to dull it down to just 2 actions, one that deals with toggling the playback, and then one to stop and shut it down. On top of that, I also integrate ngrx effects. This is a library that is complementary to ngrx store. It's not required by any means, but I would highly recommend it. It was kind of the missing piece for me as far as how to work with ngrx store in a real application. It helps facilitate side effects according to their repo, and that actually does make sense because it allows you to kind of intercept actions when they get dispatched and deal with other things that you may need to deal with, like, for instance, recording a shout-out and then uploading that shout-out to Firebase and then dispatching an action to update the view to let the user know that that happened. ngrx effects kind of comes in the middle of that and helps you deal with some of those intermediate actions. Okay, gone a while without music here. Let's have some more music. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit now. So we've kind of gone through some of the development stages, but let's fast forward a bit and let's get back to kind of the problem at hand in the summer, the IPv6 situation. And finally, is it going to work?
No sleep till!
Yeah, it was crunch time.
Yeah, this, again, August 17th. This is not that long ago, guys. IPv6 support finally landed in Spotify. I was beside myself. I had just actually gotten married myself this summer. I just come back from that, and this IPv6, it was like the greatest wedding gift ever. So I'm rushing, trying to get this IPv6 beta. It was like beta 20, I think, that finally brought that support. And I'm just rushing, scrambling, trying to get it resubmitted to the App Store. And lo and behold, they removed tons of methods that I was using. So this was like, it was a gift, but also quite a burden. And it definitely got a lot of uproar from a lot of people who were using the native SDK at that point. In particular, they removed the did stop track and did play track delegate methods, which I relied on in order to loop through a playlist. This was critical, and they instead decided to collapse all of the delegate methods to one, and you were supposed to be able to tell from this one delegate method what the current playtime was, what the metadata for the track was, when it stopped, when it played. They have brought the methods back now in beta 21, but I got it to work in beta 20 by taking the total duration of the track, divide it through the current duration by total duration, and then factor in a little bit of standard deviation of about 2 seconds to be able to determine, okay, that is about the end of the track, because the actual duration they report is not precisely what the current time of the track is when it ends. I'll save you guys the pain of any more of that discussion, but it was fun getting that to work. Okay, so IPv6 is available. I can finally get this to the App Store. Now I need to just get a build that will actually work and that is small enough to be acceptable.
You know, we've been through this before. A little tweak here, a little tweak there.
That's kind of how it was, but 130 megs was not going to cut it. This was very disappointing, and I honestly had tried to integrate Webpack before to no success, so I brought in my good friend Nathaniel Anderson, who you're going to hear from here shortly, to help me sort through some of these things. This guy is brilliant. And we really dug in to try to figure out what was going on. And really primarily two things boiled down. One was the Angular module ID shorthand did not work with Webpack. Webpack could not resolve those template URL paths, and so it required that to be gone and to use a full relative path. I'll show you a sample of that in a minute. And then the other issue was the font registration for release builds on iOS. The fonts didn't work. These would actually cause bad access, Objective-C, very nasty crashes. So figuring that out, I definitely hand it to Nathaniel on that one. That was impressive. This is what the template URL full relative path change that was needed. This is cut off a little bit, but you can see not so bad. I just need to comment out module ID and expand the template URL. So those of you who are not familiar with Angular, you can use module ID and just the file name as kind of a shorthand for your template URL. And I recommend that actually during development because you move and refactor stuff around and you don't want to have to keep changing around your path every time you move a component to a different directory. So use module ID as you're developing, and then if you get ready to deploy, just know that this may come up, but we may resolve this by the time you get there. And then the other issue, the font registration, this was needed in the Bootstrap file. So these are the two custom fonts that I use, Roboto, and then I used the Font Awesome kit for icons. These needed to be manually registered in the Bootstrap file. Without this, again, bad access, hard crash on Objective-C. With these things in mind, we were finally able to get the build down to 29.1 megabytes. This I was thrilled about. This is really less than the average size of most iOS apps on the App Store today. I was looking at some of those stats just the other day. Now the average size is a little bit higher. It's somewhere between like 35 and 40 megs for an average app size, so this is definitely below that. I was thrilled. Okay, so I want to step back, just look at Shoutout Play. As of today, this application, as I mentioned, is available on iOS, and it is also available on Android, but considered an early alpha preview release. There are some crashes that I know about, and hopefully we'll have them solved in the next couple weeks. But iOS I'm pretty happy with. You can definitely play around with it, have some fun with it. Ping me on the Slack channel if you run into something. I'd love to hear your experience. And because I'd love some help on Android, I am going to open source this project as of today. This has been a private repo for the past, ever since April, and I'd love for you guys to be able to learn from this repo. I think the architecture is something you might find interesting. There's a lot of goodies in there on how to do certain things, and it's private as of right this minute, but I will open source it here in just a couple minutes. And I'd love to take some contributions if someone really was that gracious, but there is no unit testing in the app right now, so I'm going to be joining you guys here shortly to listen to Nathaniel talk about unit testing to finally get some testing in here so I could entertain some contributions. Okay, so I just want to do a quick thank you to several people in the community that really, really made this possible. Nathaniel Anderson, of course, Alex Vakralov, who's coming up here in a minute, Brad Martin, Josh Sommer, OC Fortune, Jen Looper, TJ Van Tol, and a couple special Angular thank yous to Rob Warmald, Mike Ryan, Brandon Roberts, and Brian Troncone. Amazing ngrx inspiration. Love those guys. And anyway, you guys have fun with the app and let me know what you think.